It's 20 minutes to the top of the hour, 8 o'clock. Thank you so much for continuing with us here in Morning at NTV, looking into your business update, where we focus this morning on tax harmonization and debt in the East African Community member states. I am Priscilla Regina Naloga. You are welcome. The backbone of it is that a study on tax competition in East Africa focused on Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda and Tanzania found that these countries are providing a wide range of tax incentives to businesses, and this is for the purpose of attracting greater levels of foreign direct investment into their countries. Now, such incentives do include corporate income tax holidays, notably in export processing. Such incentives do include other notable exporting processing zones, reductions from the standard rates for taxes such as import duties and VAT. Now, the study also showed that such tax incentives are not only leading to large losses of revenues, but also promoting harmful tax competition within the region. Well, pleased to be having regional leaders on the subject matter of tax harmonization, and they will be giving us their 2 cents on what should be rightfully done to curb some of these issues. We do have the CEO Governors for Africa, Rwanda, Mr. Cyrus Nkusi, who's joining us. You're most welcome and good morning.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Uganda. Good morning, Africa.
And then we're also joined by a tax policy analyst from SEATINI, Aloysious Kittengo. Good morning to you.
Good morning, viewers. I'm Aloysious Kittengo. I work for SEATINI Uganda and at the Financing for Development program.
All right, nice to have you. So digging right into it, and I'll start from the East African region overall, harmonization of the tax regimes that should be seen as one of the priorities for the EAC member states in order to ensure successful functioning of the common market. But we're hearing common markets, but for us in the East African region, we've been hearing more common trade wars, if I can put it that way. And yet you should be seeing that member states have to be contributing to be able to have these conversations and realization of conversations that can harness a common East African region, common market. However, if the current issues that we've been hearing are true, just as members, some members are not actually subscribing accordingly. You do have members like DRC and Burundi all not being able to pay up their dues in time, which is causing the community and legislative assembly to lag behind. How much more is it when it comes to the other elements such as tax harmonization, Cyrus?
Thank you so much. Once again, I'm called Cyrus Nkusi. I work for Governance for Africa. We envision a democratic, peaceful, and empowered African society. First of all, at the regional meeting, we are here to understand the interlinkage between domestic revenue mobilization, illicit financial flows, and debt. For sustainable and how they are linked to the sustainable development goals. And also with this, we are laying strategies as regional and state actors on how to improve the DRM for resource mobilization. Well, coming back to your question, the challenge mostly, we are talking about the common market protocol as the region. The biggest challenge, all the EAC member states have signed and ratified this, they're in agreement on paper, but the challenge is the implementation. And the biggest challenge is that when we are coming to the implementation, either even negotiation for the debt, each country negotiates individually. So you find some countries are too fast to implement the regional decisions, and other countries are doing it otherwise. For example, you talked about some member countries not complying. They all have their quota share of the employees in the East African community, and all the payment, the function, the finance is taxpayers' money. So it's like if DRC or Burundi or any other country is not complying, Uganda that is complying, your tax is paying for someone from Burundi. So that's the biggest challenge. And they have also the members of EALA, the East Africa Legislative Assembly. Their session, 2 weeks. Their session take 2 weeks. That's 15 days. And each day, they are paid allowance. And it's really a lot of money, and it's in the US, in the American dollars, plus their salaries. So you find it's really affecting the operation of the Secretariat. It's affecting the movement of the community, and even implementing some of the programs like developmental programs, infrastructure. Even when you go to the, there's a cross-border trade, you find the way the cross-border trade between maybe Rwanda and Uganda is not the same way it is between United Republic of Tanzania and Burundi. So this also goes to the 3 pillars that I really wanted to emphasize. Political will, that's number 1. Number 2, also, do we really have policies in place that allows us to question about not implying this? How do we approach this if we don't have policies that are friendly? And number 3, which is the last one, do we have institutions? And if we have institutions, are they not that political? Because sometimes these institutions, you may find they are complying someone that appointed them, because most of them are political they come as political appointments. So they will just respond someone that appointed them. So the challenge mostly in the governance system is lack of the political will. I'm not saying all member states, but in terms of complying with the policies that were assigned and ratified by themselves. Thank you.
I remember it was a query that President Kagame met while he made his speech at the recent celebrations of the 25 years of the East African Community. Aloysious, in that regard, the current wide differences between the member states' regimes are definitely an obstacle without a doubt. And when we talk about tax harmonization, it's not just within state, but even across the different member states. What are some of those factors that are challenging harmonization across the region?
Thank you. I can say that when you look at some of the protocols which were signed, especially the monetary union, it highlights that member states should ensure that they do harmonize their tax regimes to facilitate the free movement of goods and services within, even capital, within the EAC region. But you find that even when they have put in place some of the laws to ensure that tax harmonization is taking effect, some members have failed to comply, but also even to ratify. I'm going to start with, we have, under the East African community, we have what they call the common external tariffs, where the member states agree that we are going to have their 4 bands, where they have the 35, which is on the sensitive goods, and then 25 on the final goods, and then the 10 on the intermediates, and then the 0 on the raw materials. And you find that that was agreed upon, and member states are supposed to ensure that they comply. But still under the same regime, they have something which they call stay of application on some of the goods, or the duty remissions within the EAC, and that gives a window of member states running away from what was agreed upon. So in the process of trying to ensure that for you as a country or a member state of the EAC, you run away from what was considered under the 4 bands and ensure that you stay, or you have an opportunity to apply the stay of application or the duty remissions. It checks on the uniformity in applying the bands agreed upon, but also even in terms of having uniform taxation or uniform application of the rates agreed upon. So that one is also challenging in one way or the other, because you have agreed upon within the common external tariffs that we are going to apply these ones. Why should you go on the other side to say we have a stay of application on these particular items? And yet we are saying that as the EAC member states, we should ensure that we have at least uniformity in terms of applying our taxes. And this can give Africa EAC member states an opportunity to look at what can support the member states in terms of industrialization, in terms of production, in terms of tax generation. Because when you look at the way currently how we are performing as EAC member states, we have not been able to reach what we have agreed upon in terms of the common market protocol when we talk about the issues of tax to GDP ratio. We agreed upon at least to make sure that we reach at least 25% of the tax to GDP ratio, but we are far beyond the 25% and even far from what we agreed upon under the sub-Saharan Africa and even at the African level. And that makes it difficult for us to be able to finance our development effectively. But also still, when you look at some of the policy we have failed to ensure that we implement is the aspect on the EAC model double taxation treaty, which is supposed to be ratified and applied within the EAC member states, and agree on how we are supposed to treat any double taxation treaty we agree upon within the EAC. But you find that each and every country in the EAC is applying its own rates, and that is facilitating in one way or the other illicit financial flows from Africa, because we have the race to the bottom in terms of giving tax incentives and exemptions which are not harmonized as member states. So that checks on the commonality or the aspect of a community, because if you and the community you agree on terms and conditions that are supposed to govern your day-to-day running as the EAC, and you find that as a result of that, and even when I'm trying to reflect on what my colleague was talking about of the meeting we have in Entebbe, of looking at the impact of illicit financial flows on domestic resource mobilizations, we found that we have a number of loopholes in our tax laws that are facilitating illicit financial flows. Those which we know and those which we don't know, because we have gone ahead to openly do what we think is good for us in terms of protecting our state sovereignty.
So the ones that we know are which ones? The loopholes?
We have agreed on the double taxation treaties that are giving most of our taxes outside Uganda. Because when you look at some of our double taxation treaties, we have in the DTAs, according to what we have been advocating for, that we should have the models that are emphasizing source-based than resident-based. We find that most of our companies that are doing business in Uganda are not residing, or they are not based in Uganda in terms of where they are taking their total residence, but they are sourcing money from Uganda. And because of some of these loopholes within the agreements which we are signing, you find that we say, okay, you will be taxed from your resident country, not from the source country. So you find that if we can agree and say we are going to be having our EAC model taxation treaty, which is based on the source-based, that will give us another opportunity. Then we can agree on the trade-offs when it comes to issues of incomes that are generated from Uganda, like the dividends, the interests, the royalties, and other management fees. You agree on the percentages. So that one is going to be informed by what you have agreed upon as the EAC member states in the EAC model double taxation treaty, in terms of how are you treating any person or any company which is doing business in Uganda but not resident in Uganda.
All right. right, Cyrus, you've been part of the conference that is in Entebbe, and I know that there's some opportunities that you have seen on a regional level through especially leadership and governance that can, if addressed or if focused on, can actually be able to address some of the loopholes that Aloysious has talked about.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, we realized that there is a poor tax administration, and this increases the acquisition of debt for member states. That also becomes a hurdle for member countries to pay back. And this leads again to heavy taxation of the citizens. Because if we look at the region, most of the taxpayers are from the informal sector who are not really empowered. Actually, when you look at the rich people we have in our countries, you can count them on your fingers. So informal sector is really driving our economy, but I think they are not facilitated well. First of all, there needs to be put measures. There should be measures to support them. Like infrastructure, give them markets, accessible places for them to do their business. If you look at when I started, I talked about the political will. The latest country is Somalia. So it's not about the economy of a country, but a political will. Can you imagine Somalia, they have paid all their contribution to the East African community. And yet some other countries, we know their big economy, in our region, they have not complied. So what can be done, first of all, is working in unison, all the sectors working together, because we believe strategic engagement, public institutions, they're the ones in charge of policies. The role for non-state actors, majorly there are two: advocacy and awareness. So you cannot do advocacy of something you don't know. So you need to team up. For example, back in Rwanda, we're members of PFM, that's a Public Finance Management Forum, where non-state actors, developmental partners, chaired by the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning, sit on the same table during the budget allocation. So it's not where you go to, let me say, Hoima, you want to construct a hospital, yet people there need a school. So, and that's also calls for consultations. Do you do consultation during, before, during, and after? So I think it calls for a government that is people-centered. It calls for a government that believes in inclusion, that's no one left behind, people with disabilities, youth, women, all angle. So, for example, so that everyone is really benefiting, because everyone is a contributor. I will not mention, but where we have been talking about this, where you find someone is a minister and also is a member of parliament. When do you implement? The country is big. So if we are a minister in a national disaster.
How do you serve two masters at once?
Yes. You sit in the parliament a whole day, and yet people need you in the certain community. So it's really something that calls the leadership and also calls maybe the decision. For example, we should not just be doing things as member states because we want to make the international community or just responding to SDG goals. But we should be doing this because it's a priority for our communities. Right. So briefly, for example, I wanted to add where you find we need to have this Pan-Africanism to move as a community, because I'm not when you say buy Uganda, build Uganda, so that's you're singling out Uganda from the community. But firstly, we have an opportunity of the population as the region. We have actually the best climate weather. We have the best soil for agriculture, for farming. So if we do this, because if you're a cattle keeper, it's not the cattle keeper that will come to buy for you. It's people without the cattle. If you're doing your growing maize, it's not the maize grower that will come to buy for you. So you need to trade with people that need maize. So I think we should think outside.
So you speak of we need to trade with people who need the maize, but the people who need the maize are then creating barriers for your maize to cut across to the region. We have seen that over and over again. But we also wanted to look into the linkage between debt and domestic resource mobilization, Aloysious. In that regard, how does debt servicing impact service delivery, especially as far as tax harmonization within the East African community is concerned, and the global recall on reforming the debt architecture really around the region?
Wow. Actually, the linkage between domestic resource mobilization and debt is big, and currently you can witness that because of the saying that because we are generating inadequate domestic resource mobilization or inadequate revenue, we have to resort to borrowing. And you have seen, as stipulated within the monetary union, member states where they agree that we should not exceed the 50% of debt to GDP ratio, but you have seen members exceeding the 50% of debt to GDP ratio because of inadequate domestic tax revenue mobilization. And I'm not going to go far away from what is happening in Uganda. When you look at, I was giving even an example. When you look at Uganda and what happened in 2024-2025 budget, we budgeted to spend 72 trillion. We project to generate 32 trillion from taxes. But, and that means, first of all, you have to look at, you are going to generate 32 trillion and you are going to spend 72 trillion. The difference is going to come from where? It is going to come from debt. If it is not debt, then you are going to depend on aid, which is most of the time restricted in one way or the other. So it means that when you collect less, you are going to put yourself into more debt. But I don't know if you are collecting more, you will be in position reducing on your debt. That one is also need to be as questioned when it comes to the people who are doing the budget for Uganda. But when you look at, I was trying to give you, challengingly, when you look at what we are supposed to pay in terms of our debt for the financial year 2024-2025, we're supposed to pay 34 trillion, but we are going to collect 32 trillion. That means we have a debt of 2 trillion. So the debt has a big impact on DRM or on tax revenue generated within. And that one even has an impact on the services you're expecting to give to the people. Because if you're going to generate less and you're going to spend more, that means you have to look at, before you are going to the acquisition of debt, you're going to look at which priority areas should I first front and which are the first priority areas. When we look at, maybe not to fail to say, when we look at our priority areas, most of the time it is the current expenditures, not development expenditures, making us or making the country fall into more debts and more debts, because you are not investing in productive sectors that are supposed to contribute to the repayment of debt, but also even generate more revenue, which can enable you to pay more on your debt. Because we have to look at how can we reduce on our debt burden.
Okay. All right, right there is where I want to conclude with Cyrus. How do we reduce on our debt burden?
First of all, on having clear measures on DRM, domestic resource mobilization. Before you collect revenues from them, they need to be informed. So information dissemination is very key for them to own this. And for them to comply and to have this, first of all, as I said before, there needs to be some infrastructures, the little revenue that are there, to facilitate them to easily do their business. Okay. Because once you don't facilitate them, you're going to come with an iron arm on tax imposement, yet they are not also surviving. So I think it calls upon a government that is people-centered, and also a government that is based on consultation. Because if we talk, I will not organize, but I'll try to organize, because I understand where we are heading together. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for your submissions, and looking forward to solution-based, tax harmonization within the East African region. Coming up next is our Kickstarter oversight on the ongoing governance and political situation. Do stay with us.